Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jerry Wong, and I am a Senior Customer Success Manager in the Adobe ANZ Education team. And I'm really excited today about today's session titled Making a Difference with a very special guest speaker, John Penn from Adobe. But first, let's kick off with an acknowledgement of country.
In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we gather and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We honour the wisdom, knowledge and artistic expressions that Indigenous communities have shared with the world. Their contributions to the arts and education continue to inspire and enrich our lives. Through creativity and education, we strive to build a future where all voices are heard and celebrated.
John is traveling in the region. He has a very unique role at Adobe. He is the only senior architect for law enforcement technologies, and we will find out what that means very soon. And we also have Dr. Tim Kitchen, our senior education specialist for APAC, on the call. Yeah, great. And he will be helping me host today's session. Now, as someone who works closely with educators and partners across the region, I know how powerful it is when technology meets purpose. John will share some insights and his passion working with law enforcement agencies around the world on tackling crimes against children with the creative tools that many of us use every day. This isn't just about software. It's also about how careers that blends creativity, engineering, and social impact can truly make a difference. Whether you're an educator guiding the next generation, a student exploring your path, or a partner helping shape digital experiences, I hope today gives you a fresh perspective on what Adobe is involved in and how your work connects to something bigger. I'll pass over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Jerry. And it is a huge privilege to have John Penn with us in Australia. As he comes regularly, it is wonderful to welcome him again. And if this is the first time that you've engaged with John, you are about to be inspired and be prepared to sit down and just soak up all the information that you're about to hear. Every time I hear from John Penn, I get absolutely inspired. And I've recently been blogging and sharing some of the experiences that I've had with John already this year. And I value the fact that I've known John now for over 10 years, and it's been fantastic to get to know him. I'm going to share my screen because I want to set the context here, folks. In this screen I'm going to share will be a video that gives you the backstory, gives you a bit of information about what John Penn does before we actually hear from the man directly.
JC was abducted from a bus stop. She was missing 18 years. I'd done the age progression for her, and when she was found, that was a moment that justified why we're here and why I think I had the coolest job in the world. My name is Joe Mullins. I'm a forensic imaging specialist with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. I am one of 4 full-time artists in the Forensic Services Unit. My day-to-day job entails doing age progressions of long-term missing children. One of the focuses that I've kind of latched onto is the forensic facial reconstructions from skeletal remains. I can't do my job without that combination of art and science. So it's forensic anthropology, fine art, and graphic design all molded together to make a forensic imaging specialist with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
In 2016, approximately 460,000 children were reported missing. The amazing impact of the work that has been done here with this organization has seen an over 97% recovery rate of children who go missing. And we have helped law enforcement identify more than 13,000 children who are depicted in child pornography images.
My name is Jim Cole, and I'm a special agent with Homeland Security Investigations. I'm a section chief over victim identification at the HSI Cybercrime Center. Over 200 million images and videos of child exploitation have been seized by law enforcement in the United States and submitted to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. If you kind of break down that 200 million and what is coming into the center weekly, that's on average about 750,000 images and videos a week. We received a case in the lab that involved material depicting two really young children. One of those images depicted one of the victims with several items, and one of those items was a prescription bottle. There was a certain amount of lens blur in the image, making the data on the pill bottle difficult to read. At the time, I happened to be involved in a beta of a new filter that Adobe was creating for Photoshop, and as a result of that, we were able to glean the person whose prescription it was. That led us to 13 different targets and apprehended that offender.
We try to figure out how to expose Nick or Jim to technologies that are unreleased and try to figure out, could we apply that to getting a kid back?
Each case that comes into the lab is really unique in and of itself, and so the variety of techniques that we use is everything from bringing up exposure or light to bringing up areas of shadow, sharpening, or use different tools to stabilize frames of video.
When it comes to the technologies, when it comes to the tools, you never know how people will use the technology that you create. Whether it's the artistic world or whether it's the law enforcement world, it's fascinating to see somebody like Jim Cole at HSI apply technologies in ways that we don't necessarily anticipate to try and impact somebody's life in a positive way.
There's an important marriage here between technology and the investigations that happen out in the field. I can tell you that without technology, thousands of children would probably go unidentified and unrescued. When you are involved in the rescue of a child, there is just no greater feeling.
In 17 years, I have not been able to come up with some soundbite or snippet to express all the emotion that comes into when you find a missing child. I can't do it. It just gets, everything just kind of pulls back and you get the emotion. That's when everything comes back. It's like, this is serious work. This is life or death.
John was in Melbourne last week and I introduced him to a group of teenagers from a school in Western Melbourne. They came to the Melbourne office and they were studying Photoshop. So they knew about Photoshop. And then when I told them that John was on the Photoshop team, their eyes lit up. I said, John actually helped make Photoshop. And then I said, well, guys, have a listen to what's happening with Photoshop and other Adobe applications now, thanks to the work that John's doing with law enforcement agencies around the world. And you could have heard a pin drop. They were just fascinated. John, let's hear your story. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you both for that really warm welcome. It's always exciting to come to Australia, see the country, to meet people, to visit with universities and schools and students and the like. So this is my last working day in the country. So I'm excited to run through this one more time while I'm here in a nice sunny Sydney day, which is kind of fantastic. So I do want to just make sure it's clear. Actually, let me share my screen. That would be a good idea, huh? There we go. So I just want to be clear and sort of provide a little bit of warning that that the talk will include some challenging content. So I'm going to expand on some of the things that you already saw in the video just before there, and we'll talk a little bit about some crime types and some bad guys. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware that that's coming. I won't show you anything illegal or disturbing or anything along those lines. But I wanted to make sure that just people are prepared for some of the topics that we're going to cover here today. So just sort of starting from scratch, I'm a software engineer by trade, self-taught, have been writing software since I was a young kid, and got my first computer, which was an Apple II Plus for the people who know. Goes way back, and I've had the opportunity to watch the development of the technology industry over the years, which has been fascinating and interesting. I've got to play a small part in the development of software from a variety of companies and also parts of government. So I consulted to the U.S. government, to the Department of Defense, and to the Navy, when I was basically right out of high school. Worked on a piece of software called Prodigy, which was a competitor to AOL back in the days. Eventually worked at Apple, which ultimately was one of my dream jobs. I wanted to work at Apple since I was a young kid. And after some changes at Apple, they restructured the company and laid off a whole bunch of us. And I looked at my software shelf and tried to figure out where it was that I really wanted to land, who I respected the most. And Adobe was at the top of that list. And so I applied for a job at Adobe and wound up getting that job. And it was as a senior computer scientist on Photoshop, which was really a huge opportunity. It was a great piece of software back then. It was a piece of software that was certainly known to photographers, but was on its way to becoming a household word, something that was part of popular culture. I found it really, really interesting as a photographer myself, because we were addressing a lot of the challenges that were happening at that point in time. And in 1998, when I joined Adobe, we were really on that cusp of the transition from film photography to digital photography. So really, really interesting era of both computing and photography to sort of work on a piece of software like Photoshop. Because my first computer was an Apple, a lot of the skill sets that I had built as an engineer were around Apple computers, around the Mac, when the Mac eventually came out, and in that basic ecosystem. And as a result, that meant that I provided expertise around those platforms, around the Mac platform, to the engineering team for Photoshop. That also meant that I spent a lot of time going back to Apple, where I had just left, because every time Apple made some kind of announcement about changing the hardware chips that were in the computers, or changing the OS, from Mac OS 9 to OS 10, all these things were impactful to the Photoshop software and required pretty significant changes to the software for it to work for our customers. So that was exciting stuff. Every year I'd have a really interesting, sort of difficult assignment as Apple adjusted what they were doing. We were advancing the technologies, and this was basically what I thought would be the ultimate point of my career, was working on software along those lines. And then I got a request to go across the street and attend a conference that was a Silicon Valley Internet Crimes Against Children conference. And I didn't really know what that meant, but I was happy to go over there because I thought, well, this is a chance to see, CSI and the enhance button and all the fun stuff that you see in the movies. Why not, right? And so I walked across for a couple of days and attended this conference. And it was an eye-opener because one of the sessions in particular that I sat in was on the child victims of these crimes. And that session was put on by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, who we call NCMEC for short, for the most part. And it really got me thinking about how we might use Adobe's tools to impact these particular these crimes and the work that NCMEC was doing. And so I spoke to the person who was giving that session, and I asked, is there a way that we at Adobe could participate? And she suggested that I come to NCMEC and take a tour. I will tell you that I've done tours with people many, many times, and it's a powerful experience. Again, it's an eye-opener, and I wound up spending basically 2 of my sabbaticals, which is basically paid time off that we get to go work or do whatever it is that we want to do, spent 2 of my sabbaticals, my 5-year and then my 10-year sabbatical at NCMEC, learning about their challenges, their issues, the problems that they were facing. I started attending and then teaching at more of these ICAC conferences as they occurred over the years. And I started to spend a lot more of my personal and focused time on crimes against children. And ultimately, that resulted in me getting to the point of basically writing a proposal to our CEO, Shantanu, asking about basically creating a job around focus on these particular areas, and that I'd like to occupy that particular role. He agreed, and I wound up changing my career path from working in engineering to working on helping law enforcement on these issues. And a little bit of a fast forward, it's been 20 plus years now that I've been working on these topics. I now sit on the board of directors for NCMEC, and the woman whose presentation I sat in is now the CEO of NCMEC. So a lot has changed in those years. The interesting thing, opportunities, you never know where they're going to come from. So for me, the first life-directing thing was sitting in that presentation at that conference. But starting to attend more conferences started to open up my area of understanding, and I started building more connections to more people who were working in the space. I started teaching outside of the U.S., first to Canada, because our next door neighbors, and was eventually invited to Interpol to speak at the specialist meeting for crimes against children there, and that opened up the world. That's where I met law enforcement from Australia, who are the ones that were responsible for inviting me down here for the conference that I attend every year, and they're the reason I come to Australia basically every year. It started opening up opportunities for me to bring experience back into Adobe. So, understanding what law enforcement is facing allows us to build tools that help them to tackle some of these challenges. And it also helps us to engage in both internal and external conversations about a lot of these topics. So what are these topics? Well, these are difficult problems, and I'll talk about 2 of them. So the first one is missing children. So in the US, so I'm using United States stats here, in 2024, the United States NCMEC assisted law enforcement on about 30,000 cases of missing children. And most of those would be resolved within the course of a year. It's a lot of kids. It's an important problem, and it's actually a pretty big challenge to tackle. One of the things that is important to understand is basically who is going missing and how. And when you start talking about these topics, there's a lot of emotion behind them. There's a lot of concern behind them, and there's a lot of beliefs that the public will have about these particular crimes. So by far, the greatest group of children that go missing in the States is going to be endangered runaways. And then family abductions is going to follow shortly thereafter. And what that means is when you have a non-custodial adult, basically, who takes a child from the custodial adult and goes off and has custody of that child illegally, and the whereabouts are unknown. And so resolving those cases is tricky. It can be a long time in resolving some of those cases, but they are a bigger part of the process than I think most people really understand, particularly in the States. And what is really interesting is the number of non-family abductions. So that's, your stranger who snatches a child off the street. that number generally sits right around 100 every year. And that is a very different thing than I think what most people believe. I think most people believe that the stranger abductions are the ones that happen the most. And that's just not what we're actually seeing. It does occur, but it doesn't occur in the kind of numbers that causes us the concern that we have in day-to-day life. So an example of a long-term missing case is J.C. Dugard, and she was a stranger abduction. And you can see right there in the missing poster here that she's listed as a non-family abduction. So that just tells both the public and law enforcement a little bit more about the circumstances that she might find herself in. She was missing for a long period of time, and the main tool, or one of the main tools that NCMEC and law enforcement will use in these long-term cases is, number one, getting their faces out and known to the public. And the problem with that is that people age over time, and so you need to make sure that the photo that you're showing the public is a current-ish photo, as close to possible in terms of somebody being recognized as possible. So in Photoshop, artists like Joe Mullins, who you saw in the video earlier, will do the age progression of a child from when they go missing and up to the current date. So if they go missing at 5, what would they look like at 8, at 10, at 12, at 15, at 18, etc. And each of those age progressions will be updated, put into the database side by side with the original missing poster or photo. And the hope is that it'll spark recognition and result in the recovery of that child. So the picture you see here on the right is the picture of JC after she was found. And you can see that work that Joe did there is pretty spot on. So this is Joe's work in progress here. It is a manual process that's done in Photoshop using just the standard creative tools that are available and have been available for a long time. There are 4 artists at NCMEC that do this work. So you can imagine for all the long-term missing cases, they're responsible for doing all of the age progressions in the US. And that work is a combination of sort of art and science, where they are using photos of siblings and parents and the like to try to come up with a forensic age progression, which is different from an artistic age progression like you might get out of a filter or some other pieces of software. And so this is Joe at Comic-Con. So every year we have NCMEC in our booth at San Diego Comic-Con, the Adobe booth at San Diego Comic-Con. And it is one of the things that we spotlight there are safety messages, educational materials, animation programs that are done in Adobe tools, and then pushed out to the public to educate children on safe practices online, et cetera, et cetera. But a spotlight is our collaboration with NCMEC and the San Diego Medical Examiner and Rady Children's Hospital. And each year we work with Joe to do a forensic a forensic skull reconstruction, where we take the skull of an unknown unsolved case and then give that skull back the face so that can be put out into the public, and hopefully we can identify who those remains belong to. So this is the case that we worked on this year. He spends about 4 days doing the clay reconstruction. Before that, clay is photographed and then converted from clay into an actual digital photo. So if you've ever seen sort of some of the TV shows that are out there in forensics, they use all the muscle markers and all kinds of other information to figure out what the face should look like on top of the skull, and then that face is put out. And we hope that people at Comic-Con will share the picture widely. It's a San Diego local case, and we hope that one of these years that we will get a recognition from one of these cases. So far, we've done 4 cases, but we haven't had a solve yet, although we have had a number of clues suggested on this particular case from this year. This year it got a whole lot of recognition and in the press, which is great because the more people who see the pictures, the more chance we have of identifying who that child is. And I will say that one of the things that's, these pictures, when they go to the National Center's database, the National Missing Child Database in the US, that all runs on top of what's called the Adobe Experience Cloud, which runs their whole website. So if there's a child that goes missing, that child is put into the database. It's made publicly available so that anybody can look for them. And that QR code that you see on that luggage tag off to the right, if you're in the US and you scan that QR code, it will show you, take you to the website and show you all the children who are missing within a 50-mile radius of where you are when you scan that tag. And I should say that not all the children who are missing, but their cases that are from that particular area. That may be where they went missing, and that may be where they were last spotted. I think one of the things that I wanted to call out from this particular work is the impact that not only does it have on the family and on the community, but also the people who work on these cases. This is some feedback that was sent from the medical examiner who recovered the remains of this child, and it was the first chance that she really had to see what this child might have looked like. And I love what I do. I love the people that I work with. It is hard work, but I don't think that everybody fully understands the impact that working on these kinds of cases has on people in law enforcement, at NGOs like NCMEC and others who are working on these cases. It's a serious lift, but it's important work. And we really do, as you heard in the video before, kind of live on the successes that we have in these particular cases. And I just want to call this out because I get asked this a lot of the time in the law enforcement space. There's only 4 artists. And there are all these apps out here that can do age progression, including Photoshop. Why don't we just use those? And it's important to understand where the limitations of software are. Forensic artists working in Photoshop to manually recreate a face or age a face is a very different process than opening up a face in a filter, for example, and then doing an age progression on it. So I'm constantly trying to also keep people from charging ahead too quickly and using tools that are not necessarily the appropriate tool for the problem at hand. So the exploited children problem is a little bit more difficult to sort of digest, but it is a massive problem right now. So as you heard in the video as well, the number of files and videos that NCMEC and law enforcement are dealing with that depict the exploitation of children is absolutely massive. These are obviously only the ones that are known to law enforcement, so these are not all of what's on the internet, but it's a lot. So lots and lots of videos, lots of images, other kinds of files are being spread, and we're trying to figure out who these children are that are depicted, and then get them to safety, get them away from whatever it is that they're being challenged with. And how this is mostly done is through something called victim identification. And what that's all about is basically using the clues and images, videos, and audio to sort of geolocate the children that are depicted in those. There's all kinds of clues. It could be visual, it could be audio, it could be metadata. It is a victim-focused approach. So we are looking for the children, and we hope that we'll get the bad guy in the process of finding the children. You don't always, but at least the child is getting the help that they need. And this is a global law enforcement effort. When you start working on a case like this, you don't know where that child is. So somebody here in Australia in law enforcement could be looking for a child who is in the United States or in the UK or in Russia. And you won't know that until you really get toward the end of the case, which makes things kind of complicated. But it also goes to say that these people are dedicated to the children and not necessarily to the jurisdictions that they work in. And that's, I think it is an important approach to this particular problem because it's a global problem. If you have a bad guy who is affecting a child here in Australia, you want to make sure that child here in Australia is safe from them. And it takes global cooperation, perhaps, to find an offender who is maybe sitting in the UK who is offending against a child here in Australia. That comes from that collaboration that's empowered by these kind of investigations. So this is the first example of a bad guy from an actual case. This particular man was sharing pictures of himself on the internet, committing crimes against children. The image on the left is what the pictures he was sharing with looked like. So he was using tools in Photoshop at the time to try to cover up his identity. And law enforcement reached out for some assistance on, how does this tool work? How might we address this particular problem? And I gave them some idea of what's under the covers of this tool, how it works, what it does in its process, and it's basically math, which is something that's going to come up here again later. And they were able to untwirl his face, and that untwirling of his face led to him being arrested 2 weeks later after Interpol released these images. Now, I always show this case in all my presentations because there are two really critical things that happen in this case because of the release of these images. On the one hand, they go viral because Interpol shared both the before and the after image. And I would argue that going viral is probably what led to him being arrested in 2 weeks because so many people saw his face, and it only took it only takes one person to recognize who that is to lead to an arrest. But the downside is that when you show the before and the after, you give away the technique. So now they've made the public aware that this particular technique exists, and we've never seen another bad guy use this tool to cover their identity. So, it is always tempting to brag about your successes. Not that that's a bad thing, but it is. But we always have to be careful about what we share with the public in terms of tools that we want to make sure law enforcement has to try to find these children. It's a great temptation. Trust me, there's so many things that I'd love to be able to say are cool things. And it's one of the reasons that a lot of my, the things that I demonstrate when I talk about these topics seem to be frozen in time. It's because we leave it up to law enforcement to release information about these techniques. So everything that you're seeing here are only things that law enforcement has talked about, and we don't really release any of these techniques from Adobe ourselves. So this is another example of just using some math to try to clarify some text on a street sign. In this particular case, we have a prescription bottle, and we're able to pull some data off of the prescription bottle. So a case like this narrowed the suspect pool from basically all men in the United States to 13 people, right? So we've got a first name, we've got a prescription, fexofenadine, and a partial prescription number. And those three things were enough to narrow it down with process being served on CVS to 13 people, which is you can knock on 13 doors, right? Which is a good thing, and that's important. So over the years, the risks to children and the crime type has also evolved. The current thing that is really a big concern is sextortion. Sextortion is basically when somebody online reaches out to children and is trying to get something out of them by threatening them with the release of images or video of that child in compromising circumstances. So it used to be a purely, let's say, sexually driven thing where they would ask for, pictures and content and all sort of stuff. It is more and more commonly becoming a tactic of scamming. So you'll have particularly young boys who will meet a young girl online. They'll have a relationship, and then turns out that that's actually a scammer, and he will insist that the child send gift cards or cryptocurrency or something to the scammer, or these images will be released to the child's parents or friends or school or whatever it happens to be. I will tell you that the risks in these cases are very, very high, in that children have taken some pretty drastic actions to get out from underneath these scammers. It's a real problem, and we're working pretty hard to figure out exactly how to deal with that. But I think that the thing that it's important to kind of keep in mind right now, as educators, as parents, as adults with children in our lives, is that it's not good enough anymore to just tell kids not to put anything online, to not do anything in front of a computer. Nowadays, you also need to make sure that we really need to make sure that our children are comfortable having conversations with us about being confronted by bad guys. So if somebody comes up to you online and threatens you or whatever, we want our kids to be comfortable coming and saying, I need help. This person is saying X, Y, or Z, threatening X, Y, or Z. Regardless of whether or not you've done something or not, it's much more important if they come out of these circumstances safe than worry about the ramifications of getting in trouble. There are some tools that are out there to try to help mitigate some of these circumstances, but we all know that when something is on the internet, it's on the internet. But there are tools both in the US and in other countries around the world, including here in Australia, that will help children to potentially take pictures down or get pictures marked as contraband so that they don't get shared more frequently or more widely. So those are the two real crime types that are a big focus that or types of investigations that I most focus on. But let me talk about technology really quickly. So we are at another very interesting time in the technological space. So photography and video and audio have changed significantly. I mentioned that change from film to the digital world, what that was like, and how we were focusing on different kinds of technologies that might have been appropriate for the film world in the early days of Photoshop, but needed to change tools to be more interesting or more useful when they came to the digital world. But that change in photography, when you change the technology, it has unexpected consequences. So, for example, when we were all developing film was expensive. You were careful about what you took a picture of, because every click of a shutter was literal money that you were going to have to pay, either in terms of the film or in terms of getting it developed. It meant that there was an additional process. So, you wouldn't take pictures of nothing. Like the whole idea, the whole concept of taking a picture of your breakfast wasn't a thing, because why would you spend money to take a picture of your breakfast, right? And it also meant you wouldn't take pictures of things that were embarrassing or deeply personal for the same reason, because you knew at some point you're going to have to get that developed, and you probably don't want to have those pictures go past the person who's developing the film. And so that meant a lot of things weren't recorded that could have been or would have been recorded today. Now we don't have those checks and balances, and now people take pictures of absolutely everything. And that means that these crime types have also opened up, because we have cameras absolutely everywhere, right? Everybody carries a camera. The digital world kind of has taken over. It's much rarer now to find somebody who doesn't have a camera than to find somebody who does. And it's pretty rare to find somebody who doesn't have a camera with them as well, which is also sort of important and interesting. Because there are cameras everywhere, everything gets recorded. It's hard not to think about what's going on in the United States in the last 24 hours, right? In this particular case, where you have a violent act that happened in front of a bunch of kids at a university, was recorded because all of them had cameras. And I imagine that anybody who's been on social media in the last 24 hours has probably come across something that they didn't necessarily want to see. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's my American experience because I have American accounts, but I can't believe that the stuff that's being shared isn't everywhere. One of the things that I've talked about a lot in these cases is that I do work on other kinds of crime types, mass shootings, terrorist events, etc. And one of the things I always notice, and I noticed in the footage from yesterday as well, is that people will film something before they will go to get themselves to safety, which I think is pretty kind of amazing in terms of the override of our core instincts. I got to film it, and then I'll figure out how to get to safety afterwards. It means that there's lots of footage of what happens. But I have told students all around the world this over and over and over. I would rather not have the footage and you alive. Get to safety first and work on that later. Image manipulation has been around forever. Image manipulation is not a new thing, right? So when you are hearing all this talk about sort of fake images, fake pictures, that's been the case since the beginning of photography. So, images have been manipulated since there were manual techniques. The invention of software like Photoshop by the Knoll brothers here certainly made image manipulation much easier, right? The existence of Photoshop means that more people who have less traditional photo skills are able to do more things, to be more creative, to come up with their own pictures and images. And we've seen all sorts of creative explosion as a result of that. And we find ourselves sort of in the same space right now when it comes to AI. The interfaces of technology and the way that we work with it has also changed over the years. So when I first started in computers, everything was command line prompt. And obviously that changed so that we started to have things like the computer mouse and then eventually these glass interfaces that were, make it very easy. You just kind of point and touch the thing that you want to happen and it just happens. And now we're at this early dawn of tools like AI generation tools, like Firefly, for example. And we're back at that level of command line prompt. And I think, as I mentioned, from my career, one of the things that was pivotal was understanding what the computer wanted from me, as I was writing software in those early days. And that helped me to build a career that included, bringing specific expertise to companies like Adobe. Well, for that younger generation right now, we're also at one of those pivotal points where there are going to be people who learn how to work with these AIs and get creative results out of them using things like this Firefly image guide, and learn how to write prompts that give them the pictures that they want, or the video that they want, or the audio that they want, that allow them to express themselves creatively in the very specific ways that they would like, as opposed to just give me a picture of a tiger in snow. Here are the creative parameters that I want you to give me an image that fits. Those skill sets are going to serve a generation of young people very, very well, I think, going forward. And even when those tools start to get easier, when we start to have the touch glass version of interfaces to AI, the people who have these understandings of what's underneath the covers, what do these things actually want from us, are going to have a skill set that I think is going to be really, really important. So if you can point your students or yourself toward learning these kinds of skills, I think it's something that will serve you well going forward. When things are created with an AI tool, I think it's important to call that out as such. And we have been providing tools such as the Content Authenticity Initiative that allow individuals and organizations to label their images as being authentic or as being created by an AI or whatever. And these technologies are not just about AI. So for example, if you're a photographer, you could take a picture using certain cameras, and those cameras will have this technology built into them, such that when you take a picture, it is stamped as, this is what I saw in the world at this particular time. This is a real picture. If you think about the forensic world, being a forensic expert being able to say, this is the actual picture I took of the crime scene is really, really important, or can be really, really important. When you think about wanting to represent your art or claim rights to your particular art, these tools are very helpful in that as well. So this is another thing I highly recommend exploring and learning more about. And then media literacy, particularly for educators. I think an important skill set to have going forward is going to be understanding how to navigate the world of the images that are and video and audio and media that's coming at us on a regular basis. And that goes for whether or not it's coming from a news agency and you're questioning whether or not something is real and understanding that that's a legitimate agency and this is a likely real content, or whether that means being confronted by somebody who is trying to, say, bully you with content that they may have generated. Understanding, how to navigate a world full of digital media, I think is going to be an important skill set for our young folks going forward. As an example, a real world example, so right before I left Virginia to come here for the last month, there was a whole series of viral videos going around created by, not sure we know who yet, that was talking about these mass kidnappings and abductions. And it was surprising because I kept getting these calls, people know that I work in this particular space, and they're like, why haven't you said anything about the 90 children who have been abducted off of the streets of Virginia in the last 2 weeks? I'm like, 90 is a massive number. I told you at the beginning of the presentation that there's 100 in a year that go abducted by strangers. And you're talking about 90 in 2 weeks. That's a lot. Surely that would be the biggest or one of the biggest news stories in the US if that was actually occurring. And so, NCMEC has had to work with local media to try to get the word out there that these things that people are seeing are not real, that somebody is out there generating content for whatever reason, oftentimes for scams, to try to lead people to websites that are just questionable. I come across, and again, most of the social media that I follow is either Adobe or related to crimes against children. And so the algorithms are always feeding me accounts that are related to children going missing. And I cannot tell you how many times I've come across scams that look just like the NCMEC website, but are not actually NCMEC, which is kind of crazy. So I think if I have an overall message for both educators, anyone really, but also for students, it's that there's a lot of opportunity to find whatever it is that your calling is. For me, I think I have had the opportunity to find it 3 times in my life. There was a period of time where I thought my calling was being a DJ, and I enjoyed that period of time, and that's where I met my wife, and it was a learning adventure and experience in and of its own. It was a little bit of a distraction from software engineering, which I'd been doing much before the DJing thing. And software engineering, again, absolutely my calling. And I would say it still is. I still code on certain kinds of projects. Really, really enjoy it. Really love working with computers, the equipment, the software, to develop software, the challenges and the problems that come with that. Love that sort of stuff. And that led me into finding the world that I'm working in now, which is working on these challenges around crimes against children. That last one, I think, is where I plan to focus the rest of my career, working career. I work with some of the most amazing people in the world on some of the hardest problems in the world, and I hope we have an impact in the process of doing that work. I can say that, victim ID, this type of investigation has identified or rescued over 40,000 children at this point, which is, I think, great in that it's a lot of children to have an impact on. It's just sad because there are 40,000 children who needed to be identified or rescued. But it is, I think it's important work. And I will say, because I always have to brag about Australia, this crime type is work done by a few people around the planet. In particular, there's lots and lots and lots of law enforcement globally, but there are some key players around the planet, and Australia is and always has been one of those key players that have had a massive impact. Task Force Argos up in Brisbane, the AFP, the state and local governments here who have victim ID groups are doing fantastic work looking for children all over the planet and having a massive amount of impact. You have, walking around this country, some people that I think I could honestly say have rescued more children than you could probably imagine, which you should be incredibly proud of. As a country who has impact far greater than the number of people that you have to throw at this particular problem. Unfortunately, your and international, outside of the U.S. Focus on these topics is going to be increasingly important going forward. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out. I don't know if there's anybody on the call who's in the law enforcement space, but if you are, I'm very thankful to you. I'm also thankful again to all the educators here, because I hope that you'll take some of this back to the classroom, particularly when you think about what young people may be facing when it comes to some of the threats online, and helping them to be a safe set of ears when confronted with those kinds of things. This is a little bit of a feedback form here. If you've got any thoughts or wanted to connect, I encourage you to use the feedback form that we've got here. But I would like, if there's any questions, we can open it up, I think, for questions.
What we might do, Jerry, is I'll play a little video that is a summary of what John's said. It also features the CEO of Adobe and just how proud he is of the work that John's been doing. It also gives you a sense of, it's not just about Photoshop. As John mentioned earlier, the Experience Cloud, which many of you may not even be aware exists, is a fundamental part of the way this whole system works. And you'll hear a bit more about this in the video I'm about to play.
The overhaul of NCMEC's website is just the latest of many generous contributions from Adobe over the years. And this time, not only did Adobe donate the tools, they gave NCMEC the engineers to redesign the website. It's an amazing partnership that began organically more than 10 years ago.
I was giving a presentation for law enforcement to tell them about how the National Center helps identify children depicted in child abuse imagery. At the end of the presentation, John Penn came up to me, gave me his business card, and said, if there's anything I can do, just let me know.
That session profoundly affected me. It was my first introduction to what NCMEC did, and I wanted to figure out if there's a way to help.
With Adobe's help, NCMEC forensic artists create age progression images of missing children. It's an important tool that's helped bring home hundreds of missing children. And Adobe didn't stop there. They also found ways to help NCMEC analysts working on images of child sexual abuse.
See that stuff, see those materials, and then try to figure out, you just sort of dive in, like, how can we find a way to figure out where these kids are? Is it in the pixels? Is it in the audio? Is it in the motion? Is there something that we can de-blur? Is there something deep in the data that's super nerdy that will help us to figure out where this child is?
And when you hear one of those stories of how you can find a missing kid or you can stop exploitation, I don't know what else could make you more proud to have played a small role in making that happen.
Adobe's involvement with the National Center has saved lives. Children have come home. Children have been removed from abusive situations. And there isn't really a better tribute to a company than that. Their tools, their commitment has made a difference.
Adobe talks about our mission being changing the world through digital experiences. And when you talk about changing the world, you change the world one person at a time. It's always been about children because they are the next generation. When you can change somebody's life, you get emotional just thinking about the kind of impact that you can have. So it's absolutely actually an honor for us. It's the people at NCMEC who are actually doing the incredible work, and we're just honored to participate.
So inspiring. John, thank you so much for your time. We're going to stop the recording so that those who are with us live can ask John some questions. Those of you who are watching the recording of this, it's very likely that John will be back with us again next year. He comes fairly regularly for some major events that happen each year in Australia in terms of law enforcement. We're really looking forward to seeing him again next year. If you do get the opportunity to meet with him in person, please do that, but also share that information with your colleagues. Folks, thank you so much for joining us and for watching the recording. John, any last minute words at all from you before we finish up?
As always, I'm super thankful to my colleagues here, to Jerry, and to Tim. As I mentioned, this is hard work. It is a lot of work with a lot of the same people around the world when it comes to law enforcement, but the opportunity to speak to educators, to students, to my colleagues here at Adobe that you all arrange really is a reset. It's great to see the fresh faces of the students that I got to speak to there in Melbourne, hear those questions. To speak to educators. I really and truly appreciate the opportunities that you provide, and I'm super thankful for that. And if there's anything that we can do to help you guys or any of the educators on this call, I hope you'll not hesitate to let myself or Tim or Jerry know about what we can do to help you, because I think there's lots of ways to bring creative change to the world.
Thank you, John Penn. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, everyone. We'll stop the recording now. And those watching live, please hang on if you want to ask John any questions. Thanks again. All the best. Bye-bye.